Hey young man, Mr. Maldonado here. Alright, so we're going to go over the vocabulary words for ecosystems, which is the next section we're getting into. So let's start by looking at the teaks that go with this. The first teak we have is 6.12e, which says, I will describe biotic and abiotic parts of an ecosystem in which organisms interact. So remember, the word interact means kind of how they work together. And the next one is 6.12f. I will diagram the levels of organization within an ecosystem, including the first one we have is an organism. Then when you have several of the same organism together, you have what we call a population. Then several populations put together give us, number 3, the community. And then all the communities working together give us the last one, number 4, an ecosystem. Let's start with the word biosphere. All right, so the word bio means life. So this is the part of the earth that is comprised or made up of everything living. That's why the definition says it's the sum, so the combination, everything, of all the living things on the earth. So different living things that we have on earth would include things such as plants, bacteria, humans, dogs, so maybe like your pet, fish, birds, and the list can go on and on and on. So pretty much, again, it's all the living things on Earth. Now let's look at the environment. The environment includes all the living and non-living things in an area. So we already went over some of the living things on the previous word. So now let's look at some of the non-living things that we have around us, that we interact with or work with every day. We have things such as dirt, rocks, cars, houses, technology. So the list goes on and on and on, right? Also water, sunlight, right? Some of the ones that people normally don't think about. So that's the environment. The environment is all the living things and the non-living things living together in that area. That makes up an environment. Let's look at abiotic factors. All right, so let's break down the word abiotic. So let's look at part of this word. What do we say bio meant again? Great job. Bio means life. So the prefix a is no. So abiotic is no life. So the things that are not living. So we just looked at some of the not living things on the previous slide when we were talking about the environment. So that is abiotic. So in this example, we're here with this picture we have, for example, the sunlight, the wind, which could be known as the air, water, so we have water in the form of rain and there in a lake, and the soil, which would be our land. So in order to remember the abiotic factors, we use something known as laws. So all our abiotic factors would be land, the air, the water, and the sunlight. And remember, for land, you can have, again, soil, rocks, dirt, so many different things, right? Air, we have many different types of gases that comprise all the air around us. Water can be in the form of snow, sleet, hail. It can be in a lake, in an ocean, in a river, through precipitation falling from the clouds, so in many different ways. And then the sunlight, obviously, coming from the closest star to us, which is our sun. Let's look at biotic factors. All right, so let's break down this word. So bio, what do we say it meant again? Great job. Life. So the biotic factors are things that are living, all the living things. So here we have some examples of biotic factors. We have what we call our producers, which would be things like moss, grass, ferns, different trees, all right? Those are producers. Phytoplankton in the ocean, that's another example of a producer. Then we have the animals that are living. We can split them up into herbivores, so things that eat only vegetation, so grass and trees and nuts and stuff like that. And then we do have carnivores, which eat meat, but we also have the omnivores, which eat meat and vegetation, so and plants and stuff like that. So I know most of us, we're omnivores, because if you eat a hamburger with lettuce and tomato and stuff, well, you're eating meat and vegetables. So most of us are omnivores. But that's a biotic factor, everything that's living in that environment. One of the things that is considered a biotic factor that sometimes we don't think about is bacteria. So that is a very important one to remember. Bacteria is a biotic factor. Organism. So an organism is pretty much a biotic factor. All right? It's any living thing that is an organism. So for example, you are an organism. Again, bacteria, we're going to keep bringing that in because again, that's the one that a lot of people forget. So bacteria, that's an organism. A flower is a living thing, so it's an organism. A tree. Phytoplankton, which is in the ocean, those are organisms, they're living things. All right, those are producers or like plant type things, but they're still organisms because they're living. So anything living. Autotroph producer. All right, so now we're looking at some of the living things. Now, by this point, you should know what a producer is. A producer is anything, an organism. So remember, an organism is a living thing. An organism that can produce its own food for energy. So one of the most important ones that we have here is a plant. All right, in this case, we have a picture of a tree. They are producers because they produce glucose. Glucose is the food that they produce for themselves so that they can have the energy to do the things that they have to do on a day-to-day basis. The chemical formula for glucose is C6H12O6. So just a quick review of elements and compounds. Is this an element or a compound? Great job. That's a compound. How many atoms of carbon do you have? Great job. We have 6 carbon atoms. How many atoms of hydrogen? Great job. 12 hydrogen atoms. And finally, how many oxygen? Great job. We have 6 oxygen atoms. All right, so that's just a quick review of something we've already done, elements and compounds. So that's a producer, anything that can produce its own food for energy. Now, a producer is also known as, or AKA, also known as an autotroph. So now we're going to introduce that word. So any organism that can produce its own food for energy, such as a tree, grass, a flower, phytoplankton in the ocean, those are all considered autotrophs. Let's move on to another organism or another living thing. Now we have our consumer here, and by this point, you should know what a consumer is. A consumer is an organism, which means living, that depends, so it relies, it counts on others to get its energy from food. So for example, you and I, we're consumers because we don't produce our own food within our own bodies for us to have the energy to run and sleep and wake up and walk and do all the things that we have to do. We have to depend or rely on something else, such as maybe vegetables or cows for their meat, so that we can get the energy from that food. So another word for consumer is a heterotroph. So just as we saw autotroph for the producers that make their own food, heterotroph is a consumer, something that does not make its own food. It relies on other things, on other organisms to get the energy that we need.